The third key factor, and that has been a challenge in a few places, is building a model that's based on a transactional revenue source. So this means moving away as a bank from a float or monthly fee-based revenue model into one that's based on transactions. It's not as critical when you build an agent near an existing branch, because then you can make sure that the channel is profitable, just because the cost advantages of having transactions go to that agent versus what they would have been if they were going through the branch are so great that the bank is interested in continuing to build this agent channel. But when you really want to use the agents or the cash merchants to reach new markets, new low-income markets that aren't currently being served, farther away from your branches, and to acquire transactions that you wouldn't otherwise be doing, having transaction-based revenue model is key. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, customers, given that the cash merchant and transactions are closer to home, it's likely that they're going to actually transact more often. We don't yet have any data that demonstrates this, but it's possible that would happen, and so it's important to have a model that's based on your revenue model based on transactions rather than being hurt by the transactions. In addition, monthly fees or minimum balances that enable you to keep sufficient float may be counterproductive in an agent banking model, because it's going to put up a barrier for customers to open accounts and use your channel, where in the end, one of the key drivers of success in agent banking is actually acquiring customers and acquiring transactions. So any barriers that you put for customer acquisition will ultimately hurt you in the long run. So you need to eliminate those barriers up front. And that means no minimum balances, no monthly fees. And the third thing that really drives the need to move away from monthly fees and minimum balances is that one of the main drivers of transactions in agent banking that we have seen is person-to-person and bill payments. Why? Because this meets an immediate customer need, and there's less, and you see actually a smaller percentage of the transactions actually being just deposits and withdrawals into your own account. So that means that those customers are likely at first to have low or zero balances on their account. So if you earn your revenue model is based on float, it's likely that you're not going to make anything. You'll make money based on the transactions that customer is doing with their account. Over time, their balances may increase, but in the early days, the accounts will likely be close to zero. And this is why, especially on mobile banking platforms, mobile money platforms where we have a lot of information, you see balances that average around $5. So float just isn't a viable revenue model. A fourth key factor of success is having a clear pathway to savings. And this is one that's also, again, unique to agent banking models, because one of the things that differentiates it from other retail payment systems is that typically in other retail payment systems, you need to have an account or e-wallet in order to use the system. In agent banking, customers can use a service typically that are just walk-in. So they don't have an account and will use it to do a person-to-person transfer or bill payment. That happens because banks already provide those services through their branches, and they're just trying to push those transactions out of the agent. So naturally, they allow walk-in customers to also use the agent or cash merchant channel. There are a few drawbacks to that. That means that a large portion of customers don't have accounts, and that means that they may have diminished loyalty to your agent banking platform. It decreases the opportunities for the bank to really generate profitability from that customer, because for a bank, customer profitability comes from starting to cross-sell additional financial services to an existing customer. But if it's a walk-in customer, it's harder to identify them, if not practically impossible to identify them, and it's especially hard to start cross-selling services. If you can open an account, then that's an entry or a gateway into providing that customer with additional financial services that will, over the long run, really increase their profitability. So having a pathway to account opening is especially critical. And some of the key drivers of success in encouraging and incentivizing customers to open account is, one, through easy account opening at the cash merchant or agent. And that means that immediately when a person wants to open an account, they should be able to do it at the agent and to immediately be able to deposit into that account. And if not immediately, very quickly be able to start using that account. A second way to encourage customers to open accounts is through preferential pricing for account holders. This is harder to do with bill payments because typically the customer will not pay if they're a walk-in client versus an account holder. Both of them, in both cases, typically a company on the other side will pay for that bill payment transaction. But person-to-person transactions are especially good opportunity because then when the customer's paying, you can reduce their pricing for a transfer if they're using their account versus just doing it as a walk-in customer. The final thing that banks need to keep in mind, and this really goes into, once they're at a stage where they have a platform that works well with that large volume of transactions and a significant customer base, and they want to start cross-selling additional financial services. We have found that the cash merchants aren't good at cross-selling. They are just not used to pushing products. That's not how they function typically, and it's easier for them to just be a channel through which you open accounts and do transactions, but little more than that. So banks who have been able to most effectively cross-sell additional financial services have done it through other channels, such as using branch employees that will travel to where the cash merchants are located, or third-party sales forces, or marketing to encourage customers to start using other financial services. But typically it's not something that we've seen cash merchants be as successful at doing. So if a bank wants to build an agent banking platform, then the 5 key elements of success are, first of all, figuring out the economics of the cash merchant and figuring out how to incentivize them. Secondly, really thinking through and ensuring that the cash merchants are effectively managed in order to ensure that the customer has a consistent experience and that the cash merchants always have cash on hand. Thirdly, banks need to rethink their revenue model and move away from one based on monthly fees or float towards one that's based on transactional revenue. Fourth, banks need to figure out how to have a pathway towards account opening and how to encourage and incentivize customers to open accounts. And 5, when trying to deliver additional financial services, they need to move beyond the cash merchant channel and figure out other ways to cross-sell additional financial services.